believing a written statement would be too jarring. According to royal sources in the Sunday Telegraph, the Prince of Wales is extremely proud of the courage and strength shown by his wife. The Sun on Sunday reports that the princess had a heart-to-heart over lunch with the king the day before the video was released. Insiders have told the paper that the king left the meeting at Windsor Castle feeling emotional. The Sunday Express is among those to report that the Princess of Wales boarded a helicopter with her family yesterday to go on what's described as a much-needed break. According to the Sunday Mirror, it's believed they were heading to Anmer Hall, their home in Norfolk. The Mail on Sunday says the family are known for revelling in outdoorsy activities there, including walking and cycling. The paper suggests, if well enough, Kate may persuade her children to indulge her love of cold water swimming. The Princess of Wales' diagnosis is, according to a report in the Sunday Telegraph, part of an epidemic of young people getting cancer aged under 50. The paper says there's now a scramble to establish the trend. Speaking to The Observer, cancer expert Professor Andrew Beggs says the rise could be down to doctors getting better at spotting the condition and younger people being more perceptive about their health than previous generations. Analysis by the Sunday Times suggests President Putin has no easy options when considering how to respond to the mass shooting at a concert near Moscow. The paper says he's likely to crack down on Central Asian militants, but according to the Times, many of them are needed to do the jobs Russians don't. Any thuggish repression, it says, could force many Asians to leave. The Observer leads on what it calls shocking new evidence that reveals for the first time French maritime police have tried physically to force small boats in the Channel to turn around. In one video, a French vessel, bought using funding from the UK, circles a dinghy holding about 25 people, creating a wake that floods the boat. The prefecture for the north of France said the aim of the intervention was to dissuade passengers from approaching the open sea. All the migrants were recovered and the smugglers arrested. And finally, the Mail on Sunday reports on the ironing board on sale for almost £4,000. Talk about the cost of living increases, it says. While shoppers may be expecting some super smart accessories, the Mail says the Laurastar system comes only with an inbuilt water tank. There's praise for the board looking like a work of art with its hand-stitched cover. One Harrods shopper remains unimpressed, suggesting it's more akin to a spaceship. Now with reaction to England's defeat at Wembley and the rest of the sport, here's Colin Harrison.
Thanks very much, Lisa. England's build-up to the European Championship this summer has begun with a defeat. They were beaten by Brazil at Wembley last night, with 17-year-old substitute Endrick scoring the only goal of the game. It was the first defeat for Gareth Southgate's side at Wembley in 21 matches.
Well, I think with 10 minutes to go, we were thinking we've played pretty well here. We've seen a lot of players that haven't had a lot of England caps. We've more than held our own in terms of possession, in terms of attempts on goal. And it's that one ruthless moment that turns the game. That is football at the highest level. You know, that is the difference between winning and losing these games.
Incidentally, Southgate has confirmed that Harry Kane, who missed the game through injury, won't be playing against Belgium on Tuesday night either, and he's returned to his club, Bayern Munich. Elsewhere, the Republic of Ireland drew 0-0 with Belgium in Dublin. In the Women's Super League, Manchester City beat Manchester United to go 3 points clear of Chelsea at the top of the table. Jess Park scored 2 of City's goals in a 3-1 victory. In the Women's Six Nations Championship, Scotland beat Wales 2018 in Cardiff to record their first win in Wales for 20 years and their 7th successive victory in all. Ireland lost 38-17 in France. This afternoon, England begin the defence of their title against Italy in Parma, with Marley Packer winning her 100th cap for England.
Pretty amazing, to be honest. I try not to think about it too much. I know a lot of things will probably come back around to my 100 cap, but it's about the kick-off of the Six Nations, and it's about us performing in that first game.
With Warrington are through to the Rugby League Challenge Cup quarter-finals. Matty Ashton scored 3 of their 9 tries as they thrashed London Broncos 42-0. There are also wins for the holders Lee, Castleford and Huddersfield. Tennis, and Katie Boulter is through to the 4th round of the Miami Open. after a superb victory over the number 11 seed Beatrice Haddad Maya. She won 6-2, 6-3 to reach the last 16 of a WTA 1000 event for the first time in her career. Meanwhile, in the men's draw, Andy Murray and Cameron Norrie are both through to the third round, but that out. And finally, a short time ago, Carlos Sainz won the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne to claim his first win of the Formula One season. His Ferrari teammate Charles Leclerc was second, with McLaren's Lando Norris third. World champion Max Verstappen was forced to retire on lap 5 with a brake problem caused a fire. Lewis Hamilton retired on lap 17 with engine failure.
Colin Harrison reporting. Finally, a glance back at some of the stories that were making news on this date in earlier years. In 2016, the former Bosnian Serb leader Radovan Karadzic was sentenced to 40 years in prison for genocide and crimes against humanity. 8 years earlier, in 2008, the Himalayan Kingdom of Bhutan held its first parliamentary elections, shifting away from a century-old absolute monarchy. In 1999, NATO began Operation Allied Force, bombing what was then the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, to stop the so-called ethnic cleansing of the Albanian-dominated province of Kosovo. The day after the bombing started, the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, was asked what he thought of the Yugoslav President, Slobodan Milosevic.
We went every inch of the way for a political and diplomatic solution. But this man is a brutal dictator. He is carrying out the most appalling repression of these poor defenseless people. Every time you analyze this question, you come back to this fundamental issue. Do we allow this repression and this brutality to continue? Do we stand by and do nothing, or do we act in the way that we can?
Also on March the 24th, 1999, 39 people died when a Belgian lorry carrying flour and margarine caught fire in the Mont Blanc tunnel. In 1981, the train robber Ronnie Biggs was rescued by police from a yacht off Barbados following his abduction by a group of British men. The men were reportedly attempting to have him extradited to the UK after he went on the run. And going further back to 1958, recruit number 53310761 was sworn into the US Army. The media dubbed it Black Monday for fans of Elvis Presley, who served for 2 years. And that completes our news briefing this morning. Now on Radio 4, it's time for Bells on Sunday, which this week comes from St Helmut's Church, Sefton in Merseyside. The Grade 1 listed church building was extensively rebuilt in the 15th century in the Tudor perpendicular style. The 14th century tower, however, was retained and today contains 8 bells, 4 of which date from the late 16th and early 17th centuries. These 4 bells were all cast by Henry Oldfield of Nottingham. The tenor bell weighs 11.5 hundredweight and is tuned to the note of F. We hear them ringing grandsire triples. Those were the bells of St Helen's Church, Sefton in Merseyside. Now on Radio 4, it's time for Profile with Mark Coles.
Wales got a new leader this week, a jump in the generational dial. The new First Minister, Vaughan Gething, the man we're profiling, called it. An historic moment too, Wales becoming the first European nation to be led by a black person.
It is a matter of pride, I believe, for a modern Wales, but also ability for me, and one that I do not take lightly.
Not a bad way to celebrate having just turned 50.
I think it's a massive step for Wales to have the first black leader of any European Parliament. That's huge.
He wants to see himself as an inspiration to young black children to see that they can reach the highest points in Welsh politics as well.
His goals are about an equal Wales, a Wales where everyone is involved, feels part of the country, its way of life, and its future.
Vaughan Gething's own story begins in Africa, not Wales. Born in Lusaka in March 1974 of mixed race, his dad, David, a vet from Glamorgan, his mum, Barita, a Zambian chicken farmer. As Vaughan's younger brother, Karadok, explains.
My dad met my mum out in Zambia. He was working for the ministry's large beef herd. He was an expert in artificial insemination.
Pretty nifty at the real thing too, it seems. The couple raising a big family. 3 boys born in Zambia, Vaughan the middle one, and a daughter after they moved to the UK. His dad returning to his homeland in 1976 to take up a job as a vet in Monmouthshire, only to be cruelly disappointed. His son Vaughan told the BBC's Wales cast recently.
My father wanted to move to Wales, and he got offered a job, was withdrawn when he turned up with my mum and a crowd of grandchildren.
The anger and sense of injustice still palpable almost half a century on. The family relocated to England, his father getting a village vet's job in rural Dorset, Vaughan's brother Karadok again.
In some ways, we were insulated from much of what could be considered racial prejudice because of the position that my dad held in the community. He was a local vet in an agricultural community. But then once we got older and started to travel further afield, that's when you would sort of notice things being said, by people that we didn't know, that didn't know you.
The bulk of their time was spent playing cricket. The Gething brothers, cricket mad, lived, ate and breathed it.
At one stage, Vaughan and I were able to go through test playing nations and pretend to be each member of the squad and try and mimic their bowling actions or batting stances. We would play test matches against each other in the back garden.
Vaughan, a wily fast bowler apparently, a wannabe Wasim Akram, a sultan of swing.
Obviously there is a little bit of brotherly competition. He was a better bowler than I, and I was a better batsman. I think that's a diplomatic way of putting it.
His passion for politics came from his paper round in the late 80s, the stories he read in the newspapers he delivered.
Our correspondent says unrest in the townships is now more widespread than the violence which followed the Soweto shootings, will abate only when political representation for blacks is introduced.
We would sing the famous song Free Nelson Mandela, and it is something that we were keenly aware of. There's lots on TV about Mandela and the gradual shift in South African government.
At 17, Vaughan Gething joined the Labour Party, helping campaign during the 1992 general election, even writing to the local papers to campaign about media bias. He went to study law at Aberystwyth University, but felt seriously ill in his first year, having to delay his studies. Close friend and Welsh Labour Senate member Ken Skates.
He was incredibly ill. It was form of kidney disease that left him so weak that he couldn't really write, and there was very little hope actually. It reached the point where a donation was going to have to be secured, and then a new novel treatment emerged, which they tested him on, and it worked. And then if you fast forward 20 odd years, Vaughan is health minister, having to make a decision on PrEP, the drug that prevents people from acquiring HIV. And he went against official advice at the time to ensure that PrEP was available for free on the NHS.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Lots more to cram in. At Aberystwyth, he got involved in student politics, became president of the University Student Union, then leader of the Welsh National Union of Students, its first black president. Political consultant Dorothea Hodge, meeting Gething at a conference, ending up sharing a flat with him for a while, and like good socialists, divvying up the domestic duties.
Of course, we split the chores. I cooked, my other colleague was the super tidier cleaner, and one job was to take out the rubbish.
got off rather lightly, I suspect. Turns out Gething was hiding a culinary light under his bin man's bushel, only rumbled when his parents paid a visit.
And his mum said, "Oh, have I gone trips instead of a special?" And we looked at each other and thought, "What? Aha! No, we haven't had that, whatever special it was." And I think the special was cooked. And we were like, "Okay, go on, take time in the kitchen. You can actually cook."
Sea bass his speciality, I'm told. Nice. He went to law school, qualified as a lawyer, went to work for Welsh law firm Thompson Solicitors, later becoming a partner. BBC Wales political correspondent, Ehigwa.
As a lawyer, he was a trade union lawyer, and so working on workers' rights, helping people who had faced discrimination on race or sex in the workplace, that's the background that he comes from.
He juggled his legal work with local politics, became a Cardiff councillor in 2004, representing Bute Town, the same ward where veteran racial justice advocate Gaynor Legault made history in the 1980s, becoming the country's first ever black city councillor. The young Gething, still a work in progress when she first met him, she recalls.
When I first met him, I thought he was very personable, pleasant, well-informed. I don't think that racial justice was always at the heart of what Vaughan thought or was involved in. I think it was always known to him and part of him, but his priority was social justice.
And boy, was he determined. By 34, he'd become leader of the Welsh TUC, the Trades Union Congress, its youngest ever president. Within 3 years, he'd been elected to the Welsh Senedd, impressing from the start, though could be overly ambitious at times, says friend, former GMB union official, and Gething's long-time campaign manager, Mike Payne.
I guess, like all young ideologues, my role was to try him to just step back a stage and to contemplate that, to think it through. And I think he has that ability. And she puts the clock forward 15 minutes without him knowing, so that he arrives on time.
In 2016, he really arrived, appointed Minister for Health. 2 years later, audaciously running to be party leader and First Minister, in the end beaten by Mark Drakeford, who reinstated Gething in the health and social care role, a position that brought him to national attention during the COVID pandemic, though not always for the right reasons. Criticised very early on when, with the pandemic rumbling into life, he resisted calls for a Wales versus Scotland rugby match to be postponed, the Welsh Rugby Union eventually taking that decision itself. Political correspondent Ehigwa.
They were late in testing patients for COVID before sending them to care homes 2 weeks later than the UK government. So there's been a fair bit of criticism for him during that time.
After health, he became Economy Minister. Then Mark Drakeford announced he was standing down as Welsh Labour leader and First Minister. A two-horse race this time, Gething versus Jeremy Miles. Miles angry when union rules deemed him ineligible for the endorsement of the Unite Union. Gething's campaign also received a whopping £200,000 donation, around 4 times what Miles raised, from a company whose owner has twice been prosecuted for environmental waste offences. Eyebrows further raised when it was revealed Vaughan Gething had written to the Welsh Environmental Regulator in 2016, asking it to ease restrictions on a subsidiary company.
He says that he was just doing the work of a constituency member. He was working to support the company, support jobs in his constituency. He does not call it lobbying. He says lobbying is a very loaded word.
Yet despite the funding advantage and strong backing of the unions, Gething only won narrowly, securing just over 51% of the vote. Some Welsh Labour Senedd members unhappy, holding a meeting earlier this week. How important is this?
I think it's hugely important. It has raised questions about his judgment, has raised huge concerns within the Labour group here in the Senedd, there has been disquiet about this. Concerns, yes, about where the money has come from, whether it was right for him to take that money, even though he hasn't broken any rules.
Gething has since promised a review of campaign donations for Welsh Labour leadership contests. I asked Ken Skates, co-chair of Gething's leadership campaign, whether accepting the money had been a mistake.
I don't think it was a mistake. Certainly at the time when the decision was made to take the donation, and some of the details that have emerged weren't known at the time. We've discussed this matter as a group. We've had a pretty cathartic discussion about it. And as a consequence of that, we've come together and united again.
Lynette Morgan.
Vaughan Gething.
Judy Morgan.
Gething.
Sarah Murphy.
Vaughan Gething.
Lynn Negro.
Vaughan Gething.
In the end, there were no Labour abstentions when Vaughan Gething was nominated as First Minister on Wednesday. The divisions within the party aside, his job won't be easy. His in-tray already bulging. Urgent decisions needing to be made about the nature of government subsidies for Welsh farmers and what to do about the backlash against his predecessor, Mark Drakeford's signature policy, the introduction of 20-mile-an-hour speed restrictions on Welsh roads. Then there's race, says racial justice advocate Gaynor Legall.
He and everyone around him is very aware of all the challenges that face. He's also aware that he won't get a fair hearing in some quarters because he is black. So, you know, there will be more mudslinging than there would have been had he been white and elected as a First Minister.
But she thinks his election does represent a huge turning point for her country, a seismic shift from the past.
It is a moment in history. Vaughan's election has changed the mindset of the Labour Party. It has changed the mindset of Wales as a whole. But what it is that he has established a role model that says to people, black people, people of colour, to them, you can make it. You know, there is room for you to reach the top. And it also says that Wales has at last recognised that we are part of its population and its fabric.
Braddock Gething, hoping Big Brother Vaughan will be more than just a symbol, that he can do some good, create a legacy, praying, he says, half-jokingly, that Wales's new First Minister doesn't end up doing a Liz Truss.
It's not just about becoming the leader. You know, he still has to last longer than a lettuce. And if he achieves nothing, he will still have that title, you know, that accolade, but it won't mean as much to him or to us because we know what he could achieve. For all of us, that will be more of a sort of feeling of pride if he's able to leave with some real achievements under his belt.
Profile was presented by Mark Coles and the producer was Nathan Gallagher. Something Understood is coming up in 5 minutes after the news, and later today we'll be unearthing a hidden treasure which hasn't been heard in over 40 years.
On BBC Radio 4.
Have you got any idea who it's going to be tonight?
Harold Pinter's dark comedy.
What's the matter with you? You're always asking me questions.
Part of a collection of rediscovered dramas.
No, I was just wondering. Stop wondering. I've got a job to do.
Bob Hoskins and Roy Kinnear star as hitmen waiting for a victim.
We've proved ourselves before now, haven't we?
On Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
What's the idea? What's he playing these games for?
Hidden Treasures, The Dumb Waiter.
Gus?
This afternoon at 3. BBC News at 6 o'clock on Sunday the 24th of March. This is Lisa Costello. Good morning. Russia is observing a national day of mourning for the victims of Friday's attack on a concert hall outside Moscow. More than 130 people were killed when gunmen stormed the packed auditorium minutes before a rock band was due on stage. President Putin has suggested that 4 gunmen arrested yesterday were trying to flee to Ukraine, a claim that's been strongly rejected by President Zelensky. More details from Vincent McAviney.
In a televised address, Mr. Putin promised retribution for the deadliest attack in Russia in 20 years. But his claim that the gunmen had been heading for Ukraine when they were caught has angered the Ukrainian government. It dismissed as absurd any suggestion it was involved. And last night, a furious President Zelensky went further, calling Mr. Putin and Russian officials scum for trying to deflect blame onto Ukraine. The Islamic State group, which said it was behind the shooting soon after the attack, has now released graphic footage from the concert hall. The video, which has been verified by the BBC as genuine, shows one of the gunmen opening fire on several people. Flowers are being laid outside the building in memory of the dead, and across Russia, a day of national mourning is now being observed.
Ukrainian officials say Russian airstrikes targeted the capital, Kiev, overnight. There have also been reports of loud explosions in the western region of Lviv, near Ukraine's border with Poland. Kensington Palace has said the Prince and Princess of Wales are both enormously touched by the kind messages they've received since Catherine announced she was being treated for cancer. She revealed in a video message on Friday that she'd been diagnosed after her